So, you know how a crime happens, and then later there's a trial? Well, what about that huge gap in between? There's a powerful gatekeeper who holds the keys to the courtroom, the public prosecutor. Today, we're going to find out exactly what they do and why their decisions matter so much. So, when a crime is committed, who gets the final say on whether it actually goes to court? You might think it's the police, right? Or maybe the judge? Nope. The decision actually rests with someone else in this really critical step that most of us never even see. All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First up, we'll meet these guardians of justice. Then we'll dig into the rule of law. That's the big idea that guides them. After that, we'll break down their specific powers, tackle the super important question of their independence, and finally, we'll zoom out and see how this all fits into the bigger global picture. Okay, let's do it. Let's pull back the curtain on these gatekeepers. In the whole story of justice, you could say our main character is the public prosecutor. So what is a public prosecutor? Well, in Thailand, they're known as the Phanakan Ayakan. The easiest way to think of them is as the state's lawyer. See, after the police do their investigation and gather all the evidence, the prosecutor is the one who acts as this crucial filter. They decide if there's a strong enough case to actually take to a judge. And here's the key thing. Their client isn't one person, it's the public interest, the whole community. And, we're not just talking about one person sitting in an office somewhere. This is a massive organization. The Office of the Attorney General is this huge nationwide network. You can see from this chart just how complex the structure is. It's all designed to make sure the law is applied the same way everywhere, from the bustling capital all the way out to the smallest provinces. All right, so now we know who they are, but how do they make these massive, life-altering decisions? I mean, this isn't based on a gut feeling or just their personal opinion. Their work is guided by one single, incredibly powerful principle. And it's really the foundation of all modern justice. And that principle is the rule of law. This is the absolute bedrock of any fair society. It's a simple idea, but it's also pretty radical when you think about it. The law applies to everyone equally. It doesn't matter who you are, a street vendor or a top government minister. The same rules apply to you. Because without this, you don't really have law. You just have raw power. And this big idea is really held up by four core pillars. First, the law is supreme. It's above any single person's arbitrary power. Second, everyone is equal in the eyes of that law. Third, our fundamental rights have to be protected. And finally, justice itself has to be accessible and impartial. If any one of these pillars starts to crumble, the whole structure of justice is in real danger. Okay, so with the rule of law as their compass, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What powers do prosecutors actually have, and how do they use them day in and day out? So a case file's journey always starts with a police investigation, right? But it doesn't just go straight from the police station to the courtroom. No way. First, it has to land on the prosecutor's desk. They're the independent reviewer, and their job is to go through every single detail before making that massive call. Does this go to trial? Or does it stop right here? You could argue it's the most important checkpoint in the entire legal process. Now, when they're making that huge decision, prosecutors generally follow one of two big philosophies. You've got the legality principle, which is kind of like a railroad track. If there's enough evidence, that's it. The case must go to court. End of story. But then you have the opportunity principle, which is more like a crossroads. It gives prosecutors some discretion. For example, they might choose not to charge a teenager for, say, shoplifting a candy bar and give a warning instead, so they can focus resources on prosecuting a major organized crime ring. It's about flexibility. And this idea of discretion and power brings us to maybe the most critical part of their job, something so fundamental it's actually protected by the Constitution itself, and that's their independence. I mean, just pause and think about that for a second. What would happen if the person deciding who gets charged with a serious crime was taking orders from someone else? A politician, a powerful CEO, anyone with an agenda? The entire system would just collapse, right? Yeah, it really all comes down to this. An independent prosecutor looks at one thing and one thing only, the law and the evidence. That's it. But a prosecutor who's being influenced, well, they've got a thumb on the scale. They might be told to protect a political buddy or go after a rival. And that's not justice anymore. That's a weapon, and it absolutely destroys public trust in the system. This is so incredibly vital that it's written right into the Thai Constitution. It basically creates this protective shield around prosecutors. The Constitution says they have to be free from interference. And by law, their entire career, their appointments, their promotions, should all be based on clear, transparent rules, not political whims. The whole goal is to insulate them from pressure, so their only focus can be on serving the public interest. So, while we've been focusing a lot on Thailand, this whole idea of an independent prosecutor is a global thing. To really get why it's so important, let's zoom out for a minute and see how it works in two of the world's major legal systems. Okay, so broadly speaking, legal systems around the world fall into two big camps. On one side, you have the inquisitorial system. Here, the judge is an active fact finder, almost like an investigator themselves. In this system, the prosecutor is seen as another public official who's helping the court get to the truth. Then, on the other side, you have the adversarial system. This is more like a contest. You've got two opposing sides, the prosecutor and the defense, and the judge acts as a neutral referee, just making sure everyone plays by the rules. Let's take Germany, for example. There, prosecutors are really powerful civil servants, and they're deeply integrated into how the court system works. And then you've got Japan, which is a really fascinating example of that opportunity principle we talked about. Japanese prosecutors have enormous discretion, and the result is they only bring forward the absolute most solid cases. This has led to one of the highest conviction rates anywhere in the world. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if the system is inquisitorial or adversarial. The core ideal is exactly the same. The prosecutor is there to make sure that what happens next is guided by evidence and the rule of law, not by who you know, how much money you have, or how much power you wield. So, that brings us right back to where we started, with these gatekeepers of justice. Making sure these guardians are independent from the powerful, but also accountable to the public, that's not just a challenge, it's the constant, vital work of any healthy democracy. So the real question for all of us is, how do we make absolutely sure the scales of justice are never, ever tipped?